So this week we're looking at the next presentation on the course we started last week. The title is the power of personal leadership. So it's a series. I suppose for this quarter, we are focusing on personal leadership, and there's a very good reason for that because we believe that um, personal leadership starts with the individual before it then affects the public. So we want to focus on this. We want to, as much as possible, look at various aspects of personal leadership. I'm not sure if you can see my screen, but if you can, um, I've got a title there that uh, this is just a continuation of where we stopped from last week. So we're looking. We last week. Maybe I should just do a quick recap. We began by um, reiterating that everyone, absolutely everyone on the planet, is searching for truth. The truth we're searching for is, among other things, and perhaps most importantly, is the truth about ourselves. We want to know who we truly are. We want to know what we are capable of. We want to find meaning. We want to know exactly where we belong among, dare I say, 7.2 billion people that are currently on the planet. We want to know what is our vital delivery. And so it's a preoccupation in the heart of virtually every human that is on the planet. And so we also talk about the concept of truth, that truth is the original information about a thing. There was a particular extract from a book I saw today, and I thought I would just read it out to um, everyone on the call. Now, I'll read it. It's from a book written by Dr. Stephen Covey of blessed memory. It says, I am busy, really busy, but sometimes I wonder if what I'm doing will make any difference in the long run. I would really like to think there was meaning in my life, but somehow things were different because I was here. So basically, this is like a thought in the mind of someone who is trying to, who doesn't just want to be busy doing things, but wants to make sure that what he's doing is um, has a definite meaning to in life. So now, against that backdrop, I want to come to this place today to talk about what I call the divine origin of personal leadership. Now, I want to make a few submissions that man's leadership mandate is a divine prerogative. Um, it does not begin with man. As a matter of fact, I want to say that our leadership actually is something that begins in God Himself. So, leadership, therefore, is a divine obligation. Obligation because it is, when we hear the word obligation, it removes options or choice. It means, as a matter of fact, this has to be done. Now, we'll be wondering, well, if you're talking about 7.2 billion people on the earth, can they all become leaders? Well, that's a good question, but as we go on in the course of this study, we'll probably see the validity of that. So, the making of man proved the priority of God's intent. As a matter of fact, for people who are familiar with the Holy Scriptures, the first thing you see is that God said, let us make man in our own image and after our likeness. And straight away, he defined the context of man's existence, that let them have dominion. So now, of course, the word dominion, we tend to associate that to some to authority, to governance, to ability to exercise leadership. So that's why we say that the making of man proved the priority of God's intent. Now, it is not some, but all mankind, male and female, that are obligated to lead in one area of life or the other. Equality of gender, therefore, was never in question from the origin. It's amazing that in this day and age, we're sort of debating a few issues like equality of genders, equality of humans, regardless of what their racial background is or what their experiences in life are. But these sort of things weren't really things that were in question from the beginning. You know, the 2 weeks ago when we were talking about truth, we said that truth is not ahead. Truth is not in the future. In fact, truth is not in the present. Truth is always back in the past. And then the further you go backwards, the closer you are to truth. So as a matter of fact, that's why we want to refer to the concept of going back to the beginning to discover the original truth about us. If you take a manual, for example, the manual of any particular product, it doesn't matter how long you've had that product, whether you've had it for 5 years. If you still want to fix anything on that product, if you want to know the original thoughts about that product, you have to go back in time to 5 years ago when you first took hold of that manual. As a matter of fact, that manual is not 5 years old. The manual was created when that product was created. So that's why we say that truth is not in the future. You can't discover more about the product the further you go. You can begin to experiment, yes. You can begin to see more. But to have the full, complete information, you have to go backwards to the beginning. So that's why I said that equality of genders, for example, has never been questioned, at least not in the mind of the maker of the genders. Now, again, the location, the sphere, and scope of leadership also is well defined. If I refer back to, I want to say, because we're looking at various literatures in most of our studies, and we refer to perhaps the most important document handed to human beings, which is the Holy Scriptures, the Bible, that we call it. If you look in the first 2 chapters, which perhaps are the best times in human history, you could see something. The scope, the sphere, the location of human leadership is well defined. Number one, it says that the dominion is the leadership exercise is not over fellow human beings. It says it's over the natural world, plants and animals. But interestingly, it also tells us about the location of those entities. So it says some are in the sea, in the water system, some are in the air. So basically, if you're thinking about farming, for example, to really, really have a good experience, you must really conquer the land, as it were. If you're trying to mine, say, petroleum or mine gold, you must conquer the soil. You must really conquer the ground before you can get soil. I mean, the earth resource out of it. So that's why I say that the location, the sphere, and the scope of leadership is clearly defined. Now, not only that, the order intended for the earth precedes man, but is not hidden from man. When I say order, I mean the administration, the governance, the sort of governing system that should be over the earth was predetermined before man even came on the scene, which was why when it was given administration of earth, it was given specific instructions to say these are the things to do, and outside of these parameters, every other action is pretty much invalid. And if you look at it, our present day experiences, they reflect the truth of this statement, that what we see is that because we are struggling with equality of gender, then you can imagine how many people have been stifled under hate, under distrust or mistrust, or under disrespect and so many other things, because we're just struggling with a very old information that we seem to, um, as it were, we seem to be becoming more modern, but in actual fact, I think we're just pretty much out of touch. So out of touch with the original information, I would say. So now, 2 weeks ago, we talked a bit about design. And so, so on this slide, I'm pretty much highlighting the fact that our leadership is by design. When I say design, if you look at the design of a thing, we spoke so much about that last week. If you look at a cup, the design of a cup tells us exactly what the cup can do. The cup has, a hollow shape, probably open if it doesn't have a cover. If you remove the cover, it will still be open. So now that design tells us that this entity is meant to contain something, to hold something. You can put liquid there, you can put semi-liquid there, you can put even solid materials in it, but it's a container of things. So now coming to this, the leadership design and function of man was determined by man's creator. I'm of the school of thought that believe that man did not appear on earth by accident. And maybe just a few thoughts on that. If man appeared by accident, then man should have affinity for accident, and so accident shouldn't be a surprise. Just a thought. But then our experiences prove the contrary. If there's an accident on the road, before we know it, the paramedics are there, the police force are there, the place is cordoned off so that people who are affected can get medical attention. And we do everything to salvage the situation. We get the ambulance in there to rescue people. We get vehicles to tow away we get towing vehicles to tow away any car that's affected. So basically, we do everything to remedy the situation. So it suggests to me that accident is not our natural state, or chaos is not our natural state. So I would say that man was not designed out of chaos. It might be in chaos, but each time it manages the chaos until it brings some form of order into the chaos. So man is perfectly suited and made to specification for the leadership over the earth and its conditions. I'm going, if you look at this statement, they sound far-fetched, they sound really, really ambitious. But we need to really relate to this fact or to this truth, so that we can put our influence in context. So look, the earth is made for man. The earth is for man, and all of the conditions that are on the earth are for man, hopefully. Sometimes some of these conditions are against man. But the more we have, the more we are able to control the conditions over the earth, the more the better the quality of our existence on the earth. But if you look at it, when I say that man is made to specification for leadership over the earth, there is virtually, we might look at some of the natural, when you see nature displaying its power, sometimes we are in awe. We see the volcano, we see maybe the tsunamis, we see the earthquakes, and we really are in awe of all that. But somehow we do things to influence the conditions again as much as we can until maybe, God forbid, the next one happens. But you could say that. But then if you look at some other part of the world, we can take a piece of land, put buildings on it. We can take a piece of land, dig it out, and get and draw our water from the earth. We can look at a farm, a piece of land, and turn into a beautiful plantation or farm. We can take the materials from the earth and create so many things out of it. such as our metals, iron. It shows how well we have the ability to shape more than any other created being the conditions, the materials on the earth. So leadership cannot be conferred by the designed, but solely by the designer. What I mean by that is that another design entity, another human being, cannot truly confer leadership upon any other human, but it has to be a delegated authority, if you like, by the designer of all mankind. Now, leadership is man's past and man's future. The present may not look like it, but our constant aspiration is to make sure that the present also conforms to our reality. Leadership actually is man's reality. The present may not relate to that, may not corroborate the true reality of human. But that's why we try to take control of our lives. That's why we try to say, well, if I don't have a job, I want to try and find a job. If someone is ill, we want to try and get it. We're trying to really control and shape things. Now, there's a statement that I made there that refusing to lead is actually submitting to be led. Because man must lead, whether lead rightly or wrongly, he must lead anyhow. So those who delegate their leadership ability, they automatically submit themselves to be led. There's nothing wrong about being led, because in actual fact, all of us has been led in one area or the other. Now, as we go on in this course, we'll see why I've framed these statements in this way. Now, the responsibility of every leader. The responsibilities are clearly defined. And the first one is what I call productivity. Productivity in this sense means the ability to create a product or a service. And I want to say that for everyone who's listening on this call, there is a product or a service in everyone. As a matter of fact, everything that we have done all of our lives are either products or services. And services can be as simple as cooking tonight's meal, as ironing the shirt, ironing for people who are married, ironing the children's shirt, children's clothes. Leadership can be as simple as, when I say productivity, a service can be as simple as singing somewhere. That is, there is either a product or a service. And if I by extension, for people who have mobile phones, absolutely everybody does. But your product, the mobile phone in your hand, is a product of somebody. Is a product of somebody. So that's what I mean by productivity: the ability to create a product or a service. Now, multiplication. If I create one mobile phone and I am the only one that has it, well, I have a product, true, but I'm the only one who can enjoy it. Or if I write a book and I'm the only reader, then I'm the only one who have access to it. If I can sing so beautifully, but I'm the only one in the room, then the gift or this product or the service does not benefit anyone else. And that's the basis for multiplication. Multiplication is the ability to serve or to offer that product or that service to more audience than one. So we have productivity and we have multiplication, multiplying the product or the service. As a matter of fact, that's what most businesses do. They don't serve just one person. If you have a Sony TV, Sony has made the same model of that product, but they've made many of it. And that will lead me to the next thing, which is inventory management and business continuity, which is that we've made a product, but we're able to channel it into the hands of so many people. We are able to make sure that the stock exists and or the stock is replenished. That'll be a familiar word. And that we can continue to be in business. When I say business now, that's a very generic term. Everything that is done on the earth is a business. If I'm going to play football, I'm in the business of football. If I'm going to sing, I'm in the business of singing. So I mean that in a very loose sense. And then, if you imagine this, if I've created a product, I've put it in the hands of so many people, and I have the capacity to keep producing it. In time, I become known for or by that product or service. Then I actually have the capacity to influence many more people with my product. Now, this if you look at this cycle, productivity, multiplication, replication, and influence is so basic to the personal leadership that we're talking about. That cycle, I call it, the cycle of personal leadership. That the ability to go from productivity through multiplication, through inventory management, and through community influence is the cycle that all of us are perhaps aspiring to in our various spheres of influence. So now the base of all man's function is entrenched in his ability to bring order into his affairs. Order in this sense talks about being able to control things, being able to shape things. So in effect, if you talk about productivity, we are taking a product. A product you may have, if you talk about a mobile phone, look at the various components in it. You have glass, you have some transistors, some capacitors, and so on. But what we've done is we've shaped all of those things and put them into a particular order. So the phone is an order. It's an ordered system. It's an order that we've brought order to a few materials so that we can have that phone. Look at an orchestra. We have, for people who are familiar with music, we have the soprano singers, we have alto singers, we have tenor, we have bass singers, we have we have quite a number of instruments, the violin, viola, we have the clarinet, bassoon, and the rest of them. But what we have done in an orchestra is that we bring order into the presentation or the service of those gifts, so that it forms what we then refer to as an orchestra, a beautiful music. So how then say, I want to make the submission that order is the first law of productivity. In other words, nothing can be productive unless it's first ordered. You can tweet that if you want, but make sure you put the visual at the back of it. I think it's an original statement. Let's go on. So let's talk about order then. Order is so intrinsic to personal leadership. Now, I have a few statements here. Order is the oldest challenge in existence. Again, I want to refer to the scriptures. Look, I will probably want to give us some kind of heads up that we should be ready to hear so much about the scriptures, as well as other materials, but especially the scriptures, because I've found the scriptures to be one of the most disrespected, one of the most underrated book in the world. It's a book that contains so much insight that it's just inexhaustible. So I'm going back there again. So order is the oldest challenge in existence. In fact, in the quest for productivity, the bulk of what we do is ordering things. You may ask me why I say order is the oldest challenge in existence, and I can elaborate more on that. But I want to say this at this point, that if you have any question, or if you have any assertion, or you think, well, that what you said there, I'm not quite sure, I don't think is really exact, feel free to use the chat button. If you look to the right of your screen, the top right hand corner, it's the first option you find, and it's clearly labeled chat. So click on that, and if you look a bit towards the bottom right hand corner, you will see the space there where you can type your questions or your contribution, or as a matter of fact, you can even go on to introduce yourself, say hello to everyone on this webinar, and we very much welcome that. So I will carry on now. Order is the preeminent function in existence. It is the foremost. It is something that it sort of precedes all that we do in existence. Everything is either moving towards order or moving away from it. If something is moving towards order, we call that organization. If something is moving further away from order, we call it, well, it's the most obvious word is disorder, but you can use the word chaos and accident. So that is something that is worth really pondering on. If we apply this, one thing I'm hoping we can do is that as we talk about this, we look at the practical application of what you are saying into our various life. Look at a student who is trying to write an exam. If the student bothers to say, right, I have 24 hours in a day and 168 hours in a week, I'm going to try and use maybe a third of those hours to read. And so it says, maybe I should cut down a bit on my sleep, maybe 6 hours, and so on. Cut down on, socials, just for that period where it needs to really deal with his studies. You find out that this person concerned is bringing order to our life, and the results tend to follow in most circumstances, except something bizarre happens. So you can see that, that's why I say everything is moving towards or away from order. But the converse is also true. If someone is entirely careless and just does everything that his hand finds to do, the result may also follow, especially where effort is well compensated. So order is the arrangement of things, of places, of people based on design and function. That's one of my submissions I wanted to make. That order is the arrangement of things, places, people based on design and function. And I took a bit of time 2 weeks ago to talk about design and function. Design has to do with the nature of a thing. It has to do with the potentials, what a thing is capable of. It has to do with how a thing has been made so that it can function accordingly. So order is simply realigning everything back to its intended order, design, and function. So if we use a knife, a bread knife, to cut bread, we are simply bringing order into the use of that knife. Every other thing will perhaps be wrong. If we use fork to eat plantain or whatever we like to eat, or noodles, we are bringing order into the use of the fork. But if someone takes the fork and use it to scratch another person, that's a disorderly use. It's an abuse of the product. So abuse is the introduction of disorder into a thing, into a people, into places. So you can imagine then, if you look at a room and, if you get in there, the books are on the floor, the clothes are somewhere on the bed, the money, the wallet is somewhere, just hanging somewhere. That is disorder. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at it in the scriptures, when the scripture was saying that God made heaven and earth, the thing that followed immediately was disorder, was chaos. And everything that was done afterwards was just rearrangement, was just reordering of the things that were there. So, and I want to say at this stage that order is simply management. And I tell you something, the more we are able to manage resources or bring order to resources, the more productive. Yeah. So that's why I linked order very closely to productivity. So order is simply the arrangement of things. In fact, I would say the correct order is a correct arrangement of things because we can order something wrongly. So order is, or right order is a right. So we can put adjectives behind that order, but whatever you call it, because you can actually have a disorder. You can make the child the head of the home, so that children detect what happens in the home. And if you maybe scold the child, you can pretty much pick the phone call and then call children's house and say that someone is abusing me here. And so the child detects what's happening in the home. So the parents become afraid of the child. That can happen. That can be an order that's allowed. You can have an order whereby everybody's afraid of the man when he comes in because it terrorizes everybody. That's an order that's allowed to grow. You can have a country where pretty much anything goes. It's an order that's allowed to grow in society. So order, therefore, is the establishment, or it's the established form and norm in an environment. I use the word norm because the word norm comes from a Latin word that's called normos. It means is the word from which the word normal comes from. So, but then if something is normal, it must be that there is something, there's a guideline that says that that's how it ought to be done. Or you can say a guideline or a law that says that is how it ought to be done. So order is produced by specification of norm, which we call law. So naturally, order is created by law. Now, that statement itself is pregnant. So which means the law that you have access to determines the kind of order that you produce. So if I have access to a secondary law, then I can produce a secondary order. If I have access to the first law, then I can produce a primary order. If I have access to a subjective law, I can produce a subjective order. If I have access to a law that is allowed to be subjugated, in other words, if you live in a society where the rule of law is not priority, then you can have an order that just measures up to the law that prevails. So in effect, the quality of law is the quality of order. So order is directly proportional to law, I would say. Right. I want to maybe throw a word around, and it's what I call governing, or if you like, and call it government. Remember, I'm going back to precept, to first law. I'm going back to first law, precept. So government is the establishment of order over a territory. I'm linking government and order and law together. It's the establishment of order over a territory, a thing, or an affair. We can add a few more to that list. Government is the preservation of order over a territory, a thing, or an affair. You'll be wondering, how does this relate to personal leadership? The word leader itself has to do with, there's a verb in that word, which is the verb lead. To lead must mean that there is a destination, there is an activity, there's somewhere where we are going. And if we are going somewhere, there must be some parameters that affect whether we get there or not, and how we get there, and what we do on our way there. There must be an order to it. There must be a path that we ought to take. So that's why all of these words are coming up. And my objective is that as we look at, I'm hoping we become so familiar with this word, such that we know that government or governing is actually our responsibility. As a matter of fact, we all govern in one way or the other. We govern. Most people govern their, homes, in some capacity, in one capacity or the other. Most people govern their careers. They take charge of it. They stay in control of it. And of course, if you lose control of something, chaos results. So if I lose control of my career, it's just natural that I begin to have unpleasant results in that area. So government, therefore, is the preservation of order over a territory, over a thing, or an affair. In fact, governing is the work, but order is the result. I can reiterate that. Governing is the work, order is the result. Order is conformance to the principle of a thing. The word principle here, it should not be used very lightly. The word principle simply means first law. So if we want to bring true order to something, we must be looking not to invent, but to conform to the principle of that thing. And I dare say that everything has is principle. Absolutely everything. The principle of the eye is, or the function of the eye is sight. Any other use of the eye will probably be abnormal. So everything else is intended, is intended function, as I would say. And so before that thing is used, I would probably say that it's important to locate the first use of it. Why is this thing? And so if the activity that is done conforms to why that thing is, then you can expect order. In fact, we don't have to pray or to fast or do any activity for order. What we just need to focus on really is knowing the intended use of a thing and conforming to that, and also making sure that the conditions that surround that thing also conform to it. This is probably the reason why, if you've ever been to a football match, the reason why we have a stadium is to host people to watch a football match, especially in a football. I'm talking about a football stadium. Now, in order to preserve that order, we probably see law enforcement agencies around the stadium making sure, or traffic wardens, and all they do is to create the conditions that will enable the intended purpose for creating that stadium and for playing that match to be fulfilled. So now, if the traffic wardens are not there, if the law enforcement agencies are not there, you probably see disorder, even though the reason for the stadium has not changed, even though the reason for the match has not changed, but the conditions around it have been tampered with. So a system is the integration of related ordered entities. That's my definition. You can think about it, and you probably have a better definition. That's fine. But we're just saying that when you have a system, there must have been an order in place that's brought a few things together. So if you take a mobile phone, that's a system. There are so many orders on that system. The set of keyboard, that's an order. The screen, the display, that's an order that's brought into a few things. You can use the same plastic or the same material for an alternative use. In fact, let me suggest an alternative use. You can take that phone and throw it at somebody. I'm not asking us to do that, but that's an alternative use. But the phone will be subjected to a chaotic function that is not intended for it. So the purpose of government is to enact or create the laws or the conditions. So a law really is the condition that allows a thing to function. So the purpose of government is to enact laws that produce order. And as a matter of fact, the toughest, because we are focusing on personal leadership. I want to suggest that the toughest form of government is self-government. The ability of a thing to govern itself. We're not talking about just a thing now. For a human to bring order, to govern, And let's forget for a moment about governing something else. The ability to govern oneself, to say, I have an exam, I need to read for 4 hours, and to subject oneself to that, to and create a condition that make that possible. Well, that that is conquering oneself. That is self-government, and that's perhaps the hardest thing to do. It is easier for someone to say, sit down there and read for 4 hours, than for someone to say, I will sit down there and read for 4 hours. And of course, all of our education proved that. When we're in the secondary school or in high school, we know how much our housemasters chase us around to get things done. So let's talk briefly about the priority of self-government. Self-government is the ability to bring order into personal affairs. We are still talking about personal leadership, and we begin to see some vital, I'll call them ingredients or attributes or vital marks along the path to or on the journey of personal leadership. So self-government is the ability to order personal space for public benefit. You probably want to kind of note these statements and ponder on them. The better personal affairs are ordered, the more valuable we are to society. This is why we say that the whole intent of this, especially for this quarter, is to focus the attention on personal leadership, because if we get these personal affairs right, naturally we become valuable to society. Look at the athlete, Usain Bolt, one of the greatest among them. Everything that Usain Bolt does to make sure that it can run 9.58 seconds is probably not visible to the public. As a matter of fact, maybe less than 0.1% of the people that gather at the Olympic Stadium will probably know what he does in his private time. But the gentleman is able to run 9.58 because is govern his personal space, and so it becomes valuable to society. So after he does that, he can do his bolt, whatever you're going to call it, should we say style? He can do that, and everybody applauds and say, "Wow!" Only because it's learned to self-govern. In fact, the word self-government is another word to be used for discipline, and we know that that's tough. It is tough, or self-discipline, or self-control. Now, value is a measure of personal and public order. If we're able to govern personal space and also translate that into to influence the society, the public, then automatically the value of that individual grows up. Look at what Google does. If you want to search something on the internet, most people will say, I want to Google it. Why? Google has taken over the ordered space of searching on the internet. It used to be Yahoo that you do before. Yahoo used to be the biggest search engine. In fact, we used to have Netscape and the rest of them, AOL. But somehow, Google came up and decided to first, before they stepped to the public, they ordered their personal space, and then they came to the public and also ordered that space and make everyone they made their name synonymous to search. As a matter of fact, when you hear Usain Bolt, only one thing comes to mind: sprint. So it's learned by personal ordering or by personal government to govern the public space. It is taking a particular domain and more or less dominated it and govern it. So, and I want to put a statement to us, a thought that you are an order, or you are order away from success that you are capable of. Let me suggest something. If you are capable of, say, drawing or painting, if you take your canvas, put it somewhere in your own secluded room, no matter how small the room is, and you begin to, scribble away, paint away, and you do that consistently, and you make yourself do it, in time, you probably churn out a few artworks that someone somewhere will put some price on. I read a book by a man called A.W. Kenyon. The book is called Signpost on the Road to Success. He said the title of the first chapter is called Keep at It. He said, make your brain sweat. It will, sorry, he said, make your brain work. It will sweat, but it will improve until you become an asset to everyone around you. So that is a thought I want us to consider. It is harder to preserve order than to create it. I mean, we can really probably relate to that. It's far easier to create something than to keep it. It's easier to arrange a sitting room, for example. For those of us who have children, you can easily put everything in order, but to maintain it in order requires more work. The same thing for our kitchens, for our cabinets, for our desks, our workspaces. Man's assignment is intended to last all through ages. I spoke earlier on about the cycle of personal leadership or leadership, or call it cycle of dominion, cycle of dominating a space, a market space. Whatever we do is meant to grow into influence. In actual fact, the destination of productivity is influence. We do that thing, we produce it, until that thing actually then totally influence society. That's really, really where productivity leads to. And then whatever is done ought to be kept in place, and then, how do I say it, last longer than they do of it. I'll put it in another way. There is posterity in the product. Maybe that's a thought for somebody. There is posterity in the product. Think about it. What we call a mango seed has been around here for thousands and thousands of years, but it's still a mango seed. There's always been a future in the mango seed. There's always been posterity in the mango seed, and then generations after generations kept planting it. They kept planting it, such that we who are current inhabitants of the earth now can live with it. And I dare say that the ones who are going to come after us are going to also live, but it's still one mango seed. So there's posterity in the product. I will probably touch on this before we round up tonight. And this is to begin to highlight the role of leaders. All that we are doing at this time is to lay some kind of framework for this, because we want to be able to touch on some of these foundational ideas or concepts before we then build on them. Because as a matter of fact, it is almost impossible to exhaust the topic of personal leadership, because personal leadership, I mean, is something that stays with one all through life. So I'll talk briefly on the role of leaders before we round up. Every leadership act is an act of change. To lead is to displace oneself from a particular position to another destination. In fact, leadership has to do with movement. It's movement from one point to another. For people who are in the business world, in the consulting world, probably say leadership is movement from as things are to how they shall be. It's from moving from as is to be. Now, you cannot lead without change. It's impossible. Which is why one of the most things that a leader must look at, must seek to learn, is change management. Because every leadership act is an act of change, and change always happens in leadership. So it therefore is natural, it's sensible to manage that change. Leaders don't preserve the status quo, because they are not about the present, they're about the future. The leader is looking at a future, an alternative future that is better than the present. and his assignment is to convince people around him that that future is better than the present and inspire them to go with him. Leaders dictate and alter direction. They alter places, they alter processes, and they also alter the response of people. They somehow, you're either going to be angry with a leader, or you're going to like him, or you're going to hate him. But a leader will not leave you alone. A leader will not leave you without a response. You must have a response. You're either going to rebel against the leader, you're either going to, clap for him, applaud him, love him, like him, dislike him, it doesn't matter. But it's going to provoke a response from you. And I'm talking about us. When I'm saying a leader, I'm not talking about somebody out there, somebody far. I'm talking about you. I mean, you and I. That you have the capacity to alter direction, places, processes, and the response of people. Everything that you do, when you begin to release your product, is going to, when I say product now, I don't mean an iPhone, an iPad. It can be those things, but even beyond, it can be a service. It can be something I'm talking about. And you see, I'm probably preempting myself. We're going to get into, hopefully in the next session, into the heart of this. How you find your personal leadership. How do you really discover it? How do you identify your personal leadership ability? We're going to look at that in the next session. So hopefully, please stay tuned. Now, leaders attract oppositions naturally because change is usually uncomfortable. They initiate change, and most people don't want change. Leaders move people and organizations from the known to the unknown. And the unknown position that the leader sees is called vision. That's a familiar word, and I want us to think about it. So I want to ask a few questions. What is your vision? Your vision simply means sight. So what are you seeing? What are you seeing that is different from the present? And I want you to maybe take hold of that. Capture it. Let me use another word. Document it. Write it down. Because the vision that you see is possible. It only needs a leadership act of movement from the present to the future. So thank you very much for listening. And a replay of this will be online almost probably from 2 hours after this presentation. So look out for it. And if you don't get it, you can send me an email and I can post a link to it to you directly. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And we hope that you join us again in the next session. God bless you. And remember that there's a vision in your heart. That vision is possible, but you need to respond to that vision by choosing movement away from the present to the future that you see. It is possible. So let's go together to the future that we see. God bless you and see you again soon. By the way, if you have any question, feel free to, let's keep the question going. Send us your questions or your responses, and we can collaborate on that. We can possibly look to treat them when next we meet. And I'm sure we will have. And by the way, if you also know, if you have a friend who you think may benefit from this, feel free, invite them along, and let's change the society for the better. As a matter of fact, leaders make places better than they made them. So and you are that agent of change wherever you are. You can bring positive influence. Whatever country you live in, that country can be glad you are there. That country, that community, that little space can be glad that you are there. We are of generation of people that turn a wilderness into an Eden. So let's do it together. Sometimes it can be lonely to lead, because leaders often take a walk first, alone, before other people are convinced. But the courage to walk alone is what births leaders. So let's be confident that you actually are not alone, because this community is with you on that journey. We may not walk in sync with you all the time, but just know that as you are leading your space, we are also leading us in our space. And I would say that our influences are going to come together, and we can have a stronger effect, a synergistic effect than the power of one. So thank you once again, and I think I should just stop here, otherwise we'll continue. So thank you, and spread the word. If you have anyone you want to bring into the session, bring them in, and then we can. And by the way, if you have any preferred frequency that you think this one should happen, if it's weekly, if it is to stay as we are, twice a month or fortnightly, or even if you think that's even too frequent, if you think it should be just once a month, let's know, and then we will respond appropriately. Thank you very much, and let's end the call here.